Before we talk about Node-RED, Andy Sadler-Clark, who's been mentioned a few times and sat just there, co-inventor of MQTT, he lives on the Isle of Wight. For those of you not familiar, the Isle of Wight is the small island off the south coast of the UK. They call us the big island to the north, so they're the small island down there. But Andy lives on the south coast of the Isle of Wight. And Andy has to commute to London most days. To get to London for a 9 o'clock meeting, he's got to get the 7:30 train out of Southampton. To get the 7:30 train out to Southampton, he has to get the 6:45 Red Jet ferry from Cowes on the top of the island. To get the ferry off the top of the island, he's got to leave home at, I've lost track, 6? That'll do. So one day, one lovely sunny day, he wakes up, having to get to London for a 9 o'clock meeting, and he drives to Cowes. By the time he gets to Cowes on the top of the Isle of Wight, it's completely fog-bound. And the ferries often get delayed when it's fog-bound. He's sat there in his car, the ferries aren't sailing. And he's thinking of that extra hour he could have had in bed if he had known the ferries weren't sailing. And he thinks, well, they offer a phone line I can phone up to find out if the ferries are sailing. The guy who gets in to update that message starts work at 9. There's a problem there. So Andy does what Andy does, and he sits in his car and he thinks. And he gets out his 3G modem, opens up the laptop, and thinks there must be something I can do about this problem. A quick scour around, and he finds this site, which is coming up very small on the screen, but hopefully you can more or less see the idea. This is a site which, using the AIS transponders that all ships have, which always broadcast their identification and location, this is a site which plots in real time where all the boats are in the Solent. So, because there's an oil refinery on the Solent, it's a really busy waterway. And Andy, having lived on the Isle of Wight for long enough, could quickly pick out all of the different Red Jet ferries by name, close dear friends of his. And Andy, being Andy, wrote some Perl code because, everyone's not perfect, but wrote some Perl to scrape that page, get the real-time locations of all those ferries, so he could work out whether they were sailing or not. And this being 3-4 years ago, of course, he then gave each of the ferry its own Twitter feed. Because Andy could put this sort of boundary, a geofence, around each of the terminals, the Cowes ferry terminal and the Southampton one, he could fire off alerts to know when the ferries were coming and going. So there Andy had sort of sat in his car. I don't think you went as far as the Twitter feed sat in your car that day, but solved that problem of how can I get that information where the ferries are into some usable form that is useful. A while later, he went to the Red Funnel webpage to look up some times for a ferry. And on that incredibly unreadable small slide, above where it says from Southampton, there's a list of live arrival and departure times. And he saw that and thought, wow, Red Funnel have cottoned on to this idea. He clicked through and it took him to his own Twitter streams. Andy being Andy, and it genuinely being April the 1st, he sent Red Jet 4 to Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes, for those not from these shores, is very, very landlocked. And sure enough, a few phone calls later, Red Funnel adopted this system for themselves. They thought it was fantastic. They'd been trying to think, how do we get into social media for a long time? And sat in that car park with a real problem, stuck, and he solved it for them. So, the Internet of Things, you can't put a label on what it is. A few people have tried, but it's not a single amorphous blob. You can't stick a label on it. Everyone has their own definition or angle or perspective of what it's all about. And just showing off the nice animated slides that, get a lot of mileage out. But it's not just the things, it's also the internet. So you've got things like Twitter spewing data in there, and social streams, all that sort of stuff. It's worth noting, when I put these online, if you look at them in Firefox, the rendering's slightly off, and that stream comes out slightly differently. But I think the point is still the valid. So, anyway. So that's the Internet of Things. It's all these different systems, all these different streams of data. But when you think about how the Internet of Things is entering sort of everyday consumers' life without them necessarily noticing, I mean, it's pretty much epitomized by the app-enabled iPhone accessory section of the Apple Store. Here are a whole ton. It took me hours to take this screenshot. It's like 50, anyway. All these different devices, and as a long-term Linux user who has to fight with projectors every time I plug one in, startup idea, projectors that just work and don't involve wires. Whenever I see a device, I think, am I going to be able to use it? I don't have an iPhone. It's better now, more and more things come with Android, but still, can I use it? How open is it? Can I turn it to my own uses? What APIs does it have?
The Internet of Drills, for fuck's sake, Adam. Oh, noisy neighbours.
What can you do? So here's an example I was kind of expecting to have been invoked more regularly today, but it did get mentioned, I think Rick did this morning, the Nest family of devices, the thermostat and the CO2, the Nest Protect. So here is sort of high-end design. People buying this don't realize they're buying a consumer device of the Internet of Things, bringing it into their home, but it has that large appeal. And likewise, the Belkin Wemo sockets. So remote control sockets you control from your phone. I mean, you can go and buy by standby and that sort of thing, but again, another example in the iPhone on the Apple Store, a high-end consumer device. Interesting comparison between the two. Nest have said they don't currently have an API, but they will be making one available, an open API in the new year. The Wemos, they don't have a formal API, but people have found ways in, and there are plenty of open source libraries for controlling them. And I think quite recently, because of their success, they're looking at ways to stabilize the platform, which might involve securing the open protocols that they use. Anyway, but with claims of a developer platform in the future. But still, it's this, whenever you look at these high-end devices, how easy is it going to be for me to integrate with what I'm doing? Or do I have to use their entire stovepipe solution? Where do we go next? Node.js has been mentioned plenty of times, so I'm not going to dwell. I think one of the really interesting things with Node.js is the NPM ecosystem. So NPM is the modules that you can install on top of Node.js to add functionality. I think there was just shy of 50,000 NPM modules in the registry when I took the screenshot at the weekend. And that's people creating little snippets of code that can talk to different things, provide different bits of functionality, and they can do that because they're able to make use of whether it's open APIs, open protocols, or backdoor hacks that they find in a device. But there is this huge ecosystem to make it, as a platform, really easy to extend to talk to new things. Take, for example, Wemo. I've really done a bad job on the size of these slides, but if you search for Wemo, there are 3 different libraries in there for that claim to control Wemo sockets. But then you get the problem of, well, who's the arbiter of quality here? So there are 3 different modules. How do you pick which is the right one? 2 of those haven't been touched for 2 years. Who knows what's going to happen? But that's kind of good in an ecosystem. You don't want one true solution for anything. You want healthy competition. You want healthy people coming up with different views on how you do stuff. And it's all about how you can empower the individual developer to do something interesting. Open APIs, standard-based protocols, and that sort of stuff that I'm sure Ian's talking about later. Days of hardware hacking. Yes, hardware is hard, but if you're at home and hobbyist, you just want to create something, it's getting easier and easier just to create those one-off fun things. Raspberry Pi, Arduino, BeagleBone Black, all those sorts of platforms are making it easy for people to make connected devices. But when we talk about connected devices, obviously we're not talking about the high-end consumer device. When you compare Nest to this, which, if you can't read it because it's tiny, a guy tweeted, built an annoying home thermometer that plays Arduino's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star example on loop when the room temperature is above 25 degrees. I mean, that's awesome. That is, someone has created a connected device for themselves, and if they keep it to themselves, that'll be great, but the fact they are able to do that means developers are getting more empowered to start solving the problems for themselves. This is from the HomeSense research project from a few years ago, Russell Davies' bike maps that Andy Huntington and Tom Taylor, who spoke earlier, worked on as well. So this is an Arduino connected map. You can see little LEDs on the map. That map is centered on Russell's flat in the center of London. Those LEDs are the Boris bike stations. It means when he leaves in the morning, he can just glance at that map, and it tells him whether to turn left or right to find the nearest, to find an available Boris bike. No screen, no apps, no notifications. It's just a connected device, just doing one thing, personalized to him. But the fact he could do that, he could scrape the data from the Boris bike site. It's that enablement of creating these interesting things that solve real people's problems. So Andy Huntington, see, I threw this one in and didn't update my speaker notes. Bublino, which you can go and buy. Again, a fun, almost irrelevant little device, if that's even a word, irrelevant. It's a kid's machine that will blow bubbles out, and it can be set up so whenever you tweet, it will blow bubbles. Fun, irrelevant, done it again. Silly, fun, whimsical devices that people can make because the technology is getting easier, and APIs are there to enable them to start joining things together. GeoCities are things. So this was a phrase Andy Huntington used a while ago. And it's this idea of, well, GeoCities was the space where you could go and make your X-Files fan site or your homage to the animated under construction GIF or whatever you chose to do. And, it's where you could go to learn the art of web design, although the art of web design probably wouldn't liken itself to GeoCities, but it was a space to play. It made it easy for people to start playing with the early web and working out what worked for them. And this idea of the GeoCities of things is very much for that home hack of the Arduino, all these sorts of things. People are able to make those connected devices that people look at and scoff. They think, what's the point of that? But the point is, some of them solve real problems for real people. People are learning skills and coming up with ideas of what you can do about a connected device. And Clay Shirky said this thing. He was very dismissive of GeoCities, but he came to realize that creating something personal, even of moderate quality, has a different kind of appeal than consuming something made by others, even something of high quality. That idea, that personal touch that I made that, it might look awful, but I made it. And again, it's that empowerment of individuals to do something. So there's been this huge explosion of platforms. This is one of those slides that perhaps it's good you can't see the detail. This was on TechCrunch earlier this year, and their attempt to map out the IoT landscape. And it's just full of many, many platforms, products, technologies, many of whom, many of the sponsors are on there somewhere. And there isn't one true IoT. There isn't one platform. It is this horrible mess of all these different platforms. But that's brilliant. That means each platform is going to be tuned for something different. Each one will fit a different set of use cases. And it is that the fact we have this mess is brilliant because people are working out what works for them. People can choose different platforms to do whatever they want to do. There is no one-size-fits-all. So the challenge of integration is how can you start getting these different things talking to each other. As a developer, I don't want to worry about how I talk to something. I want to worry about what I do once I'm able to talk to it, whether that's talking to a serial device or talking to someone's web API. So whispering through, Node-RED, it's no more yak shaving. It's that idea that you can just get on with the task at hand. You don't have to find you've spent the whole evening working out how to talk to a serial device. where we go? I'm going to whisk through in the interest of time. So yeah, Node-RED, it's got this huge library of nodes already in there for talking to different things. Things like inject node and debug node for doing things on the screen you'll see in a moment. Function nodes, template nodes, TCP, UDP, network connectivity nodes. There's hardware nodes. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm sort of speeding up a bit, so I've got time to show you a couple things before I'm off stage. NPM, so you can build on top of the NPM ecosystem to add new capabilities in there. Do the next demo, which means I've skipped quickly over the side that says do the first demo. So let's go do a demo. So this is Node-RED running in the browser, and this is where I get lost because I don't have it on my screen in front. For those who haven't seen it, you've got this palette down the side here of nodes that can do a whole bunch of stuff. It's a long way away, so I can't really see it. So here is an example flow that, so I should say, Dave Conway-Jones sat over there, is my co-developer with this. He put this one together for me. This, when I click this inject button, but that could be set to do every few seconds, that's gone to that website, scraped the ferry positions of all the red jets, found the red jets, and just printed out, there are the red jets in their position. So that's half of the twittering ferries done. The other half, yeah, that was easy. So the other half would then just be to wire that up to Twitter, which I'm not going to do live in front of you right now. Here's a really simple example. I've got a current cost meter at home monitoring my home energy. That's publishing to a MQTT broker every few seconds. But that's on one broker. Perhaps I also want to share my data on Zively. So here's a node, the blue node on the left here. That's subscribed to the broker with the long topic strings, and then you can copy it and find my home energy. And that's now wired up to republish on Zively. So now I've got a stream of data that's going to my broker over here, but just wiring that up, it's now going over to Zively as well. And you can see I've also got it wired up to this debug node, so you can see the values are starting to percolate through here. And it's that fact I can very quickly just drag things on, wire them up. It's all about not tight coupling services together. So here we've got an example. If anyone wants to start tweeting with the hashtag ThingMonk, that would really help this demo.
Yeah, that would be good.
In general, yeah.
Be quiet, folks.
So let's try doing live demo. Sign. So I hit deploy. So here I've just added in the nodes that talk to the serial port. So hopefully, good. This is the worst part of this demo, that I can't see the sign. So you can now start being mean to me on Twitter. In fact, I'll tell you what, I don't want that there. Here's one I prepared earlier. It's a really funky angle to be. Right. So now oh dear. So this is a flow that I can't see what's going on. So here's a node. It's going to talk to Twitter. It's going to go to hashmark ThingMonk. I've typed that right. Did I miss? Oh, I've done the ThinkMonk. So that's now going to get any tweets mentioning ThingMonk. I'm going to flirt through some sentiment analysis. I'm then going to split out only the positive ones because we don't want all the negative stuff coming. And then we'll be flowing that up to debug. So hopefully we'll start seeing them in the side panel. Something there which we'll see in a sec. And then the scroll message. So hopefully there should be some tweets starting to appear on that scroll sign. There we go. And it is all just that idea, just drag you on a node that has some functionality, and I haven't had to worry about how do I talk to that sign. There's a node for that. So we provide some very low-level building blocks of nodes. See. Oh, the drop table, yeah, well done. We do have SQL nodes, we have Redis nodes, so there's all the sorts of injections you could do. But we provide sort of low-level nodes for building more complex systems, but people starting to contribute high-level nodes. For example, there's you've seen the bright red in the palette, the Twilio node, which Andrew Lindsay contributed, one of our first few third-party contributors. So you can start doing things with SMS with the nodes. There's lots to do. Go play with it. It's cool. But the trick is, one of those flows was spitting those tweets out to a WebSocket listener, and there they are in my presentation. Woohoo! But really easy to get things talking. So that's Node-RED. There's lots more I could talk about, but I think James is.
Yeah, trying to get time back.
We're getting time back. So there we go. Node-RED.